Well, welcome to the 2025-26 new coordinator training from the California Department of Education. And let me start off by saying Happy New Year to everyone. So we're here today to provide some guidance and hopefully some support and teach you a few things that would be helpful in your new role. That said, my name is Paul Valencia, and I will be your producer for today's webinar, which is a focus on support during testing. Before I hand it over to our knowledgeable presenters, let's go over a few housekeeping items. First, all participants are muted. In order to submit your questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. We will not be using the chat feature for this webinar and all webinar series, our new coordinator webinar series. We're using the Q&A feature. Second, a copy of today's resource guide was sent to you via email. If you haven't received it or you need to access it again, I'm going to go ahead and place the link in the chat. And by clicking on the link, it's going to take you to a folder where you can download the guide or you can make a copy to your own Google Drive. Just keep in mind that there's no edit access from the link we shared, so you do have to download it and save it, okay? And lastly, we are recording the presentation, and so there will be an archive of this presentation probably in about a week or so. Give us some time to make it accessible. We have to do video edits and what have you. And it's going to be on the upcoming and on-demand trainings webpage on the CAASPP and ELPAC website. All righty. With that, I would like to introduce today's expert panelist. We're very fortunate to have with us today Jadine Jones from Sacramento County Office of Education and Erin Gordon from San Diego County Office of Education.
Well, thanks, Paul. Happy New Year, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm so excited about this topic and really excited about the next hour that we have with you. And today we've got our agenda, and it actually aligns with our success criteria. So let's take a look at what we're going to learn by the end of the hour together. And so we will leave with an understanding around initial and ongoing support needed during testing. And I've been talking to a lot of coordinators out there, and we're all getting ready, right? A lot of planning and preparing because testing season is right around the corner. Also, we're going to learn a little bit about supporting students with special needs, and then we're going to explore some common testing issues. We'll discuss test security, and then we're going to have a Q&A time to answer some of your questions. And as Paul said, use your Q&A to put those questions as we go along, and at the end, we'll be able to address many of your questions. All right, well, we wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the resources for this year. And the following pieces are included in the new coordinator training as asynchronous, and we call that on-demand or pre-work. And these are optional. They're really meant for those who need a little bit additional information. The pre-work includes 2 videos. The first is titled Resources, and that's going to cover the agencies that as a test coordinator that you're going to need to know and understand, some of the websites that you frequent, manuals, flyers, and other resources. The second is called coordinator role, and that covers the LEA coordinator role, but it also covers the site coordinator and test administrator levels. So that's another handy pre-work asynchronous video available. There's also some pre-work with existing videos like the Assessment 101 videos. I really like those because they cover the who, the what, the when, why, how of each test, each assessment within our assessment system. And then the intro to CERS, the California Educator Reporting System, that was held this summer in the fall. And so those recordings are available, and also a great review if you did attend those. All right, and all those, there's links to these in your resource guide. And so hopefully you you were able to grab that from the chat. I know Paul put that in the chat, so make sure you have your resource guide with all of the links that we're going to cover today. Now, the rest of the new coordinator training program is a series of these monthly webinars. They are designed to give you that just-in-time information, and the full list is also in your resource guide, but let's just review what's coming up. All right, so for today, we're focusing on support during testing. Then in February, we're going to talk a little bit about the completion tracking, and then we're going to dive into test security. We're going to touch on test security today, but we're going to really take a deeper dive in February. And then in April, we have a session on gathering feedback as you're nearing the end of your testing window in April. So getting that feedback is really key, as well as receiving the scores. All right. Well, in addition to our training series, I do want to point out some of the resources that are available that are excellent. And I use these all the time. So first, we have the coordinator checklists. Who doesn't like a checklist? I love checklists. And I'm one of those that I just like to cross things off my list. I feel so it's so satisfying. So there's a checklist, and there's a checklist for both the CAASPP and ELPAC, LEA coordinators, and there are checklists for other roles like your site test coordinators. And then each checklist that includes it's a comprehensive list of all the tasks that and activities that you will need to accomplish throughout the year. And the tasks are listed by month where they're most likely to occur. But these are in a Microsoft Word document, which is really helpful because you can actually customize it. Now, the second resource I want to highlight is the Coordinator How-To Hub. I think it's fairly new. It's been around for maybe we're in our second year of the Coordinator How-To Hub, and it's on the CAASPP and ELPAC website. It houses all the existing how-to resources. And what I like is it organizes them by time and by topic. So if you get stuck, it's a great place to start. And then lastly, we want to highlight our success agents. Success agents are there to help you. And if you do not know who your success agent is, there is a lookup tool that's linked on your resource guide, and it's really important that you get the name of your success agent, and because they are there to help you. Okay, all right. So we've gone over all of the preliminary resources, and now we're ready to jump in. So we're going to focus on support during test administration. And in this section, we're going to explore the major responsibilities of the LEA CAASPP coordinator and the ELPAC coordinator when sites actually begin testing. Now, once testing is launched in your LEA, there's going to be a need for initial support and then also ongoing support. And you know, the main support is definitely going to come from you, the LEA coordinator, but you should also have a plan for how you're going to pull in your technology staff and your other central office staff with specific expertise. You can pull them in so that you can ensure that hands-on support is available to your sites when needed. Now, when you're thinking about support, there's really two different time frames that we want to think about. We have support during the first couple of days when testing first opens at a school site, and then ongoing support after testing has started. Now, I recommend, and this is something that you might want to do right now this month, but tap into your seasoned test site coordinators. So you might be new as the LEA coordinator, but you've got some folks out there at your school sites that have been doing this a while. And so reach out to them and ahead of time and talk to them about some of the common issues that they've experienced in the past. And those discussions can really help you identify areas that may require additional information or support. It'll give you some information so that you can be proactive and address some of those challenges in case they come up again, or mitigate them so they don't happen. Some examples, you might have some sites that that had technology issues during testing, students being disconnected, or maybe encountering network connectivity issues. Um, you might have some sites that have faced some test security issues that you might want to address. Having those conversations early will really help you anticipate potential problems, and we want to be proactive. That is our goal. So remember, if a school site can have a smooth start to testing, you will most likely you will experience a smooth process throughout the entire testing window. So we want to make sure that we set up our sites for success. All right, so there are many strategies that you can provide other than the one I just mentioned, talking to your veteran site coordinators. But there's other strategies. So providing support. One example, before testing begins, work closely with your IT department for technical support. I used to meet with we had a help desk, and we would do a little mini training with our IT folks. We would also set kind of some parameters. What calls do they call assessment services, my department, and when do sites need to contact the help desk? And so it really helped to identify roles. We also did some troubleshooting training with our help desk. And we were proactive. We did this well before the testing window started. Also, work with your site coordinators. Prepare those login information cards or whatever method your LEA uses. But it's important to do that well ahead of testing. And these are the cards that have the student's name and SSID. They're going to need that information to log in. Just a little tip, make sure, verify that the first name on that card is the official name in CalPads, which is in Tom's. That is going to be key. So don't use nicknames. We want to make sure that the official name that's in CalPads is the name that's used on the card. Also, it's important to work with your special education department to seek guidance and support. We've got some students with specialized testing needs, and we want to make sure that they have what they need to be successful. And so partnering with your special education department is really key, having those conversations early and often. Also, have a clear plan for makeup testing. That's going to ensure that all students who were absent or weren't able to complete the test during the window, they actually can do that within your official LEA testing window, that they are able to complete the test. And then finally, work with your site coordinators. You have a plan, but make sure that they have a plan for their specific school, that they have procedures and a process in place if something should happen, that their test administrators know who to contact. It would be them, and that there are clear avenue to get the support that they need. They need to know who to contact for what if something should happen, so that is communicated and that those procedures are in place. The key to support is that no matter how, we need to make sure that testing can begin as seamlessly as possible for our sites. All right, so let's talk a little bit about students with special needs. Okay, we're going to start with our special education students. Now, we touched on assessing students with disabilities and how site coordinators should review the IEP back in September. We had a webinar. and it was on the accessibility resources. But we also have the recommendation that we're reviewing those IEPs to determine whether the student should be assigned the general assessments or alternate assessments for ELPAC and CAASPP. And it's also important to establish the procedures and the documentation of how those test assignments are made. Now, the CDE has developed an optional alternate assessment decision confirmation worksheet. It helps IEP teams determine whether the student is eligible for an alternate assessment. Now, the worksheet is optional, but that decision-making process, that is required. And we've put the link to the worksheet, and I'm going to see if I can, let me see if I can share it with you right now so I can show you what it looks like. Let's see. Do I have it? Alternate assessment. Am I sharing the form, Jadine? Yes, okay. So the alternate assessment participation decision-making tool, it is linked in your resource guide. And this is really helpful for your IEP teams who are making these decisions. What I like is it actually, like, it asks a question, and if the answer is no, you stop here. If it's yes, then you continue going. So it's a really, it's a great tool, and they can go through. It's 18 pages, and there's a series of questions. And so I highly recommend, if your IEP teams, you need to get this in their hands so that they're making the best decision for the student in terms of, hey, should this kiddo be taking the alternate assessment or the general assessment? Okay, I'm going to keep going. All right. So let me see. All right, JD, I need your help. Am I back on the slides? Okay. Sometimes it works. Sometimes technology doesn't work. So anyway, thank you for confirming. All right, so we have that to really help our teams. And so again, that form, it is optional, but the process to come to that decision, it is required. And I like the form because then you have documentation that they've gone through that process. And remember, when we're talking about alternate assessment, alt for one, alt for all. So if a student is eligible for one alternate assessment, the student must take the alternate assessment for the other state assessments. Okay, you can't mix and match. All right. And it's a good idea to coordinate with your special education staff, ensure that students are appropriately identified for the alternate assessments, and also be sure that that you're coordinating with your special education department around communication. It's really critical that what you're communicating to the site administrators and site test coordinators is consistent and aligned with what's being communicated to the IEP teams, that everyone's in the loop and everyone is on the same page, hearing the same message. Okay. All right. We're going to move on. We're going to keep moving. Next is we're going to talk about ELPAC domain exemptions. Okay, for ELPAC, when we talk about domains, we're talking about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And when a student's IEP or Section 504 plan specifies that the student has a disability for where there is no appropriate accommodation for one or more of the domains, that student could be eligible for that domain exemption. And then they would be assessed on the other domains. So there are a couple resources I want to point out. Okay, and by the way, for domain exemptions, if you have a student with an approved domain exemption, you will go into TOMS and mark each domain for which the exemption was approved. So there is a process in TOMS. Okay. Now, to best understand the domain exemptions, we recommend in the it's online, the ELPAC information guide. There is a domain exemption section. So if you're not familiar with domain exemptions, we highly recommend taking a look at that section in the information guide. And we've put a link in your resource guide to that. Now, there is an initial and summative ELPAC domain exemption decision-making tool. It's kind of like the alternate assessment decision-making tool, but this one is for domain exemptions. And highly recommend that that also is something that you provide your IEP teams who are making those decisions around domain exemptions. And again, I'm going to show it to you. It looks a little similar to the other tool. Okay, so let's see. Here it is. The initial and summative ELPAC domain exemption decision-making tool. And Jadine, do I get a 2 thumbs up? Are we seeing it? Okay. All right. So this is really helpful. So a student with a 504 or IEP, they might be eligible. And so this helps the team go through these sets of questions, and it's only 2 pages. And it helps them make those decisions about any domain exemptions. Okay. I also want to point out the online ELPAC information guide, the domain exemption section. This really gives you a lot of information about the subject. So it's another one to review if you have any questions about the domain exemptions. Okay. And then finally, I do want to point out one more document. Okay, so there is what's called, and I'm going to pull it up right here. It's the Summative ELPAC Participation and Scoring document. This is really handy, especially if you have students with domain exemptions. It gives different scenarios, and for any student that missed or did not get assessed on a domain, it actually tells you if the student is going to be counted as a participant, and then if the student's going to have an overall score, a composite score. So there's several different scenarios, and it will help you determine if you'll get what kind of scores you'll get for a student if they're missing 1 or 2 domains and all the different scenarios that exist. So I wanted to point that out as well. Okay, Jadine, one more time. Am I back on my screen? Okay. All right. One more reminder. I do want to say domain exemptions are not permitted for the alternate ELPAC. They are only available for the general ELPAC summative ELPAC assessment. And then a final reminder. A lot of times we talk about exemptions, domain exemptions, and we get confused with parent opt-outs. They are 2 different things. So please, 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 they are 2 separate things. Parent opt-outs are only available for CAASPP assessments. Okay, and those there's a provision in the law that allows in the state of California parents to opt their child out of testing for CAASPP. For ELPAC, there is no parent opt-out provision. All English learners must take the summative ELPAC each year until they're reclassified. And so the domain exemption, that is a totally different situation, and it's really determined on the eligibility through the IEP or 504. Okay, so hopefully I made that clear. Don't want anyone to be confused. Okay, we're going to move right along. And next up are non-public schools, NPS. So non-public schools, they enroll students with exceptional needs, and it's based on the student's IEP. Non-public schools are certified by the California Department of Education, and it is so important to establish contact with all of your NPS schools well before testing happens. And you do that because many of our non-public schools have different dates of testing and different schedules. So it's important to confirm and know when they're going to be testing. Also, LEA coordinators of the school, of the student's district, are responsible for adding NPS test administrators to TOMS. It's also the responsibility of the LEA coordinator to ensure that staff at the NPS who administer the test are properly trained and have signed the security affidavits. So that is really important. You'll also need to track test completion status for your NPS students, just like you do for all your other sites. And so regular monitoring is essential. Since enrollment in NPS, it varies throughout the year. So as the LEA coordinator, it is going to be critical to build that strong relationship with your NPS coordinators and maintain that open communication with them. All right. Okay, we're going to shift. We talked about students with special needs and some scenarios with different populations, but now let's shift and talk about some common testing issues that might happen. And I know Jadine and I, through the years, we've encountered many different testing issues. So today we're just going to focus on some of the most common ones that we could think of. All right. So students who enroll in your LEA after the testing window has opened, that might require a little extra attention because there is a delay between the student's enrollment in CalPads and then when the test becomes available for the student. Now, once the student is in CalPads, it can take 24 to 48 hours before the student will actually be able to test. So understanding that delay is going to help you. Once the student is in TOMS, you're going to be able to see if they completed a test in another district. So this is really helpful. And completed tests, they're going to be grayed out for the student. So the student goes to try to log into a test in your district. If it's grayed out, most likely the student took that test at their prior district. And it prevents the student from being tested more than once. So it's actually a good. This also is reflected in the completion report. Now, it's really important. CalPads, your CalPads administrator is going to be your best friend. That's all I have to say. If you don't know who your CalPads coordinator is at this point, you've got to go find out who this person is and maybe bring them cookies or something. Making sure that your CalPads coordinator is updating CalPads regularly and keeping things up to date, including those enrollments, that is going to be really critical. And so also knowing who that is and maintaining a strong relationship and constant communication with your CalPads person, that's going to be key. Now, you're going to have students that do move out of your district. And know, just like when students enter your district, when they leave your district, there's also a lag time between when they become disenrolled. So they might show up on your completion status report. Just keep that in mind as students move out of your district. Okay. All right. Another issue, once students start, you may receive emails regarding what we call a change in student status, okay? So the change in status means that either a student's special education status or their Section 504 plan status has changed in CalPads. And so these students are no longer listed as special ed or with a valid Section 504. Usually this happens when plans expire. Okay, so maybe an IEP expires, or when students move to a new district. And so when there is a change in status, all of the students' accommodations that had been assigned, they're going to be dropped in TOMS. So the report will show you why they were dropped and what accommodations that they had. And now, not all students listed on the status report change will have had accommodations. Like I got one last week or this week, and there were no accommodations. So you don't need to do anything. But if there were accommodations, and if the IEP, let's say, had expired, but then it was reissued or renewed, you would need to put those accommodations back into TOMS because they had been removed when that change of status happened in CalPads. So anyway, so it's something to keep in mind. And this might happen pretty regularly. Keep an eye on your emails because they'll come through to you as well as the site coordinator. Now, if another thing, if a student has already started a test with incorrect test settings, so those are the designated supports and accommodations, the test might need to be reset through the STARS request. And if the test settings are required specifically by the 504 or IEP, then you'll most likely need to reset. You'll be asked to do an appeal and to reset the test. Okay. So we recommend checking with your success agent. If a process like this, especially if it's new, happens, please reach out to your success agent. Okay. Now, another issue that's common, what if a student is given the wrong test? Because that's happened before. Or if the wrong student is accidentally tested. Errors like this are considered testing irregularities. So again, we're going to rely on our STARS appeals process through TOMS. So if the wrong SSID was used, then you would go and file a report online through TOMS, through the STARS appeals. And this one in particular, it's called an incorrect SSID used case. You may be required to file an appeal to ensure that the correct test information is swapped to the right student. And also, you need to confirm the details of the SSID swap. There's case notes that you would use when you're doing the report. ETS and CDE, they're going to review the case. If approved, the test results then will be reassigned to the correct student in the system. So know that there's a process in place and it's documented. And make sure that you know. And again, we encourage you when you have these individual little incidents, please reach out to your success agent and they'll walk you through the process. Okay. All right, I am going to now, I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to allow Jadine to take us through the uncommon issues. So I'm going to stop share and she's going to share the next section for you.
Great. Thank you, Erin. You want to confirm for me that now you can see my screen? Awesome. Great. So much great information, Erin, and thank you. So I want everyone just to maybe take a little 10 seconds to kind of just process lots of great information. And I just love presenting with Erin. So informative. So thank you, Erin.
I like presenting with you too, Jadine.
All right. Well, so uncommon issues. That's where I'm going to pick up. And again, I'm Jadine Jones from the Sacramento County Office of Education, and it's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So, uncommon issues. So, even if you are an experienced ELPAC or CAASPP coordinator, there are things that come up new every year. And I think Erin mentioned this a little bit earlier. Been doing this a few years, and something new happens just about every year. But we do our best to prepare, right? So, if a student encounters a technical difficulty during testing, something you're going to want to do, stop the test right away. Don't allow the student to continue until the issue is resolved, and that takes some time and some investigation. As an LEA coordinator, you want to develop a plan to help your test site coordinators and your test administrators administer the assessment effectively, right? And so what you want to put together a plan. What happens when you're out of the office? What happens then if something goes wrong? Who do they contact? If there are technical disruptions, technical problems, those can impact a student's performance and your testing timelines. So having a plan to ensure what staff needs to do if something comes up like this. And we all hope it doesn't, but you know what? If you have a plan, you're going to be ready to roll no matter what comes your way. So keep in mind that the LEA coordinators, you are the only ones that can contact the LEA success agent. So you need to have your timeline, your process of communication set in place. Who does the test administrator contact, like the test site coordinator? And then test site coordinator brings it to you. Or how's that flow of information going to happen? And then you need to make sure that you get all your information regarding the testing incident, the student's name, the SSID, the test, all of that before you reach out to your success agent, right? So that's important. I know there are some coordinators that I've talked to that create a Google Doc for tracking that they share with their test site coordinators. And it's just specific to testing issues that come up. And they pop it on there so that the LEA coordinator can then review it. Erin mentioned this, and I'm going to say it again. Your LEA coordinators are a valuable resource. So learn from other coordinators who have experience and find out what they've done in situations. And if there is a problem that continues to rise to the top, an issue, then look at it and let all your site coordinators know, hey, we seem to be having this issue. So, and then help them problem solve so that they know what to do. And then if it needs to go to your LEA success agent, again, what's the process going to be there? All right, being flexible. LEA, CAASPP, ELPAC coordinators, AKA call us Gumby, all right? So being flexible is key during testing. So keep a flexible mindset, but remember, we need to uphold the standardized testing procedures because testing brings unpredictable things, real life world challenges, but yet the rules and the security around our tests requirements, those don't change. So you may come into some scheduling conflicts. What do I mean by that? Fire drill, unexpected. An assembly, that one probably should have been known about in advance, but not always. And also student absences. Those can impact your testing plan, right? So coordinators just need to learn to adjust, adapt their testing times and their staffing to ensure all sessions happen and that the test administration process is followed through. You could have some staff challenges that happen during testing. A test administrator gets sick. It happens, right? What is your plan? Who is going to administer the test that day? Or are you going to postpone? If you have someone who can step in, make sure that they are fully trained and they've signed that security affidavit. So these are just some things to think about and have on the front of your mind and in your plan as to what are we going to do when. So in summary on that flexibility piece, just be flexible and expect the unexpected, right? So just making sure that you have some thought about some things in advance. Security, extremely important. If you've attended any of the recent ETS trainings and you've heard Moses over and over again, test security, high priority. So let's take some time to talk about test security. So as the LEA coordinator, I know you understand test security, and that you need to include it in all your training materials for your test site coordinators, your test administrators, your test examiners. Today, we'll talk a little bit about secure materials and some types of test security incidents, and then a little bit about the security and test administration incident reporting system, STARS, that appeal process. Erin talked about that a little bit earlier, but we can never say it enough. Oops, sorry about that. Right, so for test security, it's critical that everyone knows the expectation and the rules and regulations per se around test security. And it comes down to planning. So as a coordinator, it's the coordinator's responsibility, and it's a big one, to maintain the security across all the aspects of testing within the LEA. So many elements of testing, there are many parts that are secure, and it's crucial that you safeguard this information to avoid breaches in the system. So for example, the highest level of breach and test security failure per se is if testing items are posted to social media. This can cause a serious security risk and raises validity questions, and it could lead to possible tests having to be rescored, right? Be vigilant in your preparation and your training. You want to make sure that students do not have access to their phones or other unauthorized devices during testing to avoid potential breach of testing information. So a security plan. When you develop your training and testing plan, you'll need to address quite a few different issues related to security. Maintaining the security of the user's accounts, right? No sharing of users and user counts. This was brought up recently. So each individual needs their own specific user account for their level of access that's needed. So ensuring that the users are assigned appropriate accounts so they have access to the data and only the personally identifiable information. Sorry, I had to go real slowly on that one. The PII that's necessary to their role to perform their duties. Train the sites to securely store the student login information. Erin mentioned this earlier as well. If you are using login cards that has the student's PII on it, has their name, has their SSID, making sure that you are talking with your staff about how to keep those secure. Don't leave them out on teachers' desks overnight, all right? So they need to be secured before, during, and after testing. And then speaking of after testing, it's still a ways away, right? We haven't even started, but you need to be planning for this. After creating your plan, you need to have a plan for secure destruction of the secure materials. So one of your jobs is to ensure that staff understand all of the security requirements related to testing and keeping things secure. So before testing begins, have a protocol established that will set up how you're going to monitor and track security issues. As I mentioned, some schools use a Google Doc, others use a document shared with their district or LEA. How are you going to submit STARS? Are the test site coordinators going to do that, or do they go through the LEA coordinator? Personally, I have them come through me. I like to review what it is, what happened. And sometimes they are an incident that doesn't actually need to go to a STARS report, and we can work on resolving that locally. put together in your plan, how are you going to store your testing materials securely? And make sure that somebody besides you knows how to access them and where they are and where the key is to get to that. Because if something happens and you're out of the office that day, how are they going to get to those materials, right? How are you going to collect, pack, and ship materials to ETS that need to be scored? How are you going to securely destroy materials used and unused after testing? There'll be more information coming out as we get near the end of the testing from our testing contractor that has specific details around that. But know that you are responsible for keeping that safely secured until it comes time for destruction. And then the February webinar that's coming up will cover completion tracking and more information on test security, incident types, so that you will have more details. But with ELPAC just around the corner, I strongly suggest you start planning now. So some local protocols. Your security protocols are determined locally by your own LEA. And in your plan, define the different roles and procedures for site coordinators. As I mentioned, who's going to submit the stairs report if you have one. Hopefully you don't have any, and that would be an awesome testing year. Local decision, test site coordinator or LEA coordinator to submit that information. Also, reportable incidents. So keeping track of the different incidents so that you can look back as to what is going on in your LEA. It is the recommendation of the CDE that LEA coordinators review all the stairs cases before submission, because there are some, like invalidations, that cannot be reversed. So it's good to have that conversation and know what's going forward. Like I said, that's why I like it to come through me. And then it's important to track incidents that are going on so that you can use them in future trainings. So let's take a moment. I've talked about secure materials, but what are secure materials? So first of all, the materials, the student information on the computerized testing screen, that's a secure material, right? Do not take pictures of that. No screenshots of the pictures may be taken on the screens, with the exception of remote testing situation for the K2 LPAC, right? The item security and information bar on the student screen. So it's a little bar and has different little dots and colors. And unless you're really looking for it, you may not even notice it. But this can be decoded and tracked if someone takes a picture of it and posts it online on social media. So during testing, our testing vendors are strongly tracking what's happening on social media. And so they can track that information if it shows up. It's a little barcode on there. Also, materials outside of the online testing system that are secure. The directions for administration, the DFAs. Those are, you get those from behind Tom's. So just a reminder, anything that's behind a coded page, like where you have to log in, consider that material secure, all right? So DFAs aren't out yet for LPAC, expected ETA next week. Stay tuned, watch your emails for that. So DFAs, those are secure. LPAC picture cards, secure. Writing booklets for LPAC, secure. Special forms for testing, like Braille for Smarter Balance, large print. Those are secure items. They have test items in there. And it may not be totally obvious, but we've said it a couple times, the student login information, secure. And then the one that usually catches a lot of my newer test administrators, the scratch paper, right? Collecting scratch paper and keeping that secure because it could have students' answers on it. Um, Always let students know that you're going to be collecting that scratch paper included in your training, so that no one walks out with anything on that information on that page. And then completed ELPAC K2 writing response sheets that are used for remote testing. These are also considered secure because they have student responses to actual test items. When it comes to handling test materials, all secure materials must be kept, you got it, secure, and in a locked location when not in use during testing, right? So as I mentioned, the ELPAC K2 writing books, if you ordered those, they're probably arriving to you this week. I received a package yesterday, right? So keep those securely stored until they're distributed, used, and when they're at the test sites, make sure your sites have a secure place and then keep them secure until you send them to ETS for scoring. Information, student logon information, scratch paper, keep them secure. When testing's completed, these must be destroyed securely, and that will be per the CDE and ETS guidelines. Like I said, more information to come about that, specific details. Hang on to them, but keep them ready for when you are finished. And then remote testing, like I said, the student login information and scratch paper can be destroyed by the student on screen while the examiner watches. If you're in a remote session, then just tear it up right there. And then also for remote ELPAC K2 testing, it is acceptable for a test examiner to take a screenshot of a student's writing to transcribe the response into the answer book during the session. However, the screenshot may not be saved to the computer. If it's accidentally saved, you need to do a double delete. So take that, throw it in the trash, go to your trash, and then permanently remove it by emptying the recycle bin. All right, we are to the point where it is time for homework, right? So we have some important things that we want you to do when you leave from this session. If you haven't already, take the opportunity to download the LEA coordinator checklist. If you don't have those yet, you can go to the CAASPP-ELPAC website and just put in the little search bar coordinator checklists, and you'll be able to get to those. So there's one piece of homework, right? So make sure you have those. They're extremely helpful, detailed documents for new coordinators and even for experienced coordinators. Because then if you're a checklist person, you can just go through, I am, mark, okay, did that, did that, right? Next thing, plan on developing your local security protocols. How are you going to handle testing issues? How are you going to handle if there's a stairs case? Where are you going to keep your secure materials? Right? And then create a local testing schedule and share that with your staff and all your other employees, parents, interested parties regarding that. And then not take advantage, but make good use of staff that you have that can support during testing that aren't test administrators or test examiners. How might these other people on campus help support during testing? And keep in mind those folks possibly for during makeup testing when you might have to be in another location. So something to think about. All right, questions and answers. Boy, we went long today. Question and answers. It looked like most of them got answered. Thank you, Erin.
Yeah, there were some. I'll just address. There were a few around, well, one question in particular was around the stairs online form and where do we get these forms? And just so you know, for those of you that have never done a stairs before, it is all in Tom's. So you're going to log into Tom's and it's up at the top navigation panel. You'll see stairs and it walks you through that process. I do want to point out we are going to cover a little bit more on around test security and stairs in the February training as well. But I put a couple links to the stairs appeals section of the guide. And there's a test security web page on the CAASPP ELPAC website. There's a complete page devoted to test security with all the resources, and there's a great video as well that I recommend. So anyway, put those links in there. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, great. And then thank you for sharing that. And there's another one where someone's asking about the non-Tom's affidavit, if it's the same exact information as the other one. And I don't know, but I know that you can't, once you sign the Tom's security form, you can print it. So you can have that information there available. And so there we go. All right.
And there is a question, the alternate assessment decision-making ELPAC domain exemption, which is a different thing than parent opt-out. But that is done with your IEP teams, and usually they have their annual. And so having that conversation should be done during those IEP team meetings. And then there's a question about the CAASPP. I just lost it. I think it went. The CAASPP opt-out. Yes, that's an annual, that is an annual process. Parents need to provide in writing their desire that their child does not want to be tested on specific CAASPP assessments. So that definitely is an annual process as well.
And a question I always get about that, Erin, is there a form that parents can complete? And no, there is not a form. So having the parents just include their student's name. Usually I have them for their date of birth, their grade level, what tests they're asking to not take, and the year.
So in my district, because it's so large, we decided to standardize. We were getting it helps. So we did create a form with some of that information, but we didn't solicit parents. You're not allowed to solicit parents, but we had it handy for our site test coordinators in the event that that happened so that they could capture that information on the form, because you need the student's SSID. You need to know which tests that they are desiring or opting out. So they might be okay with ELA, but not math. And so anyway, it's just something to keep in mind that is okay to create some kind of a form, as long as you're not just mailing it out, blanketing and sending it out to all your parents. We don't want to solicit, but have it handy to help the process, because those have to be entered into Tom's for the PGE, the parent guardian exemption. So it just helps with that process.
Thank you, Erin.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. It looks like we're just about out of time. Excuse me. Some people had asked about accessing the PowerPoint, and I'm going to put the CAASPP and ELPAC upcoming and on-demand trainings webpage, and from there you can access all past recordings. And so you can just go into, I believe it is the all trainings from A to Z. Yeah, all
Yep.
trainings and recordings. Click on that and you can view past recordings. Alrighty. Okay, well, thank you, Erin. Thank you, Jadine. And thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. It's really helpful, and yeah, we appreciate it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, and we're going to promote some upcoming training opportunities. And there are links to register in the resource guide for all of these trainings. First, we have our next NCT webinar, February 19th, and we're going to discuss completion tracking and security. And then in April, we're going to be wrapping up the 25-26 training series here. And we're going to talk about gathering feedback and preparing to receive scores. Also, there's the coffee sessions, and we would encourage you to go ahead and sign up for those as well. And they're hosted by CDE and ETS, and they offer opportunities for LEA staff to ask questions, get answers about assessments, trainings, resources, and more. And they usually happen pretty much on a monthly basis. And I believe the next one is on February 10th. And March 10th. And then also there's the ETS training series called Connect for Success. And you heard Jadine and Aaron talk a lot about connecting with your success agents. This is a great opportunity right here to meet your success agent from, one of the 11 regions. And they're there and they'll provide all kinds of information. Great group of people. All right. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the assessment spotlights. You'll find subscriptions in the resource guide. And you can also follow CDE on X at CDE Assessments. And you can also connect with CDE on Instagram. And the links are in your resource guide. And that brings us to the end of our training. Thank you so much. We hope that the information that was shared by Jadine and Aaron today was very helpful and timely. I know it's a lot, but just, to remind you, you're not alone in this work, and you can always reach out to the plenty of networks of coordinators in your roles throughout the state. You have the LEA success agents, and you have staff at CDE. They're there to help you any way that we can, okay? And also, there is a post-evaluation at the end of this training. If you could just give us a little bit of time, we really appreciate it. And we do read your comments, and we try our best to alter some of this stuff to make it more accessible for adult learners. With that, on behalf of CDE and my colleagues, Aaron and Jadine, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next webinar in February. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Take good care.